Welcome to Real English Voices. I'm Tom.
And I am Ria. Hello, everyone. It is so good to be here with you today.
Today, we are going to talk about something that I think almost every single English learner has felt at some point. In fact, not just learners, I think everyone has felt this.
I have a feeling I know exactly what you are going to say. Is it that feeling in your stomach, that tightness?
Exactly, that tightness, the sweaty palms, the heart beating so fast you can hear it in your ears. We are talking about fear, specifically the fear of speaking.
Ah, that is such a huge topic. You know, Tom, I was reading a comment from one of our listeners yesterday, and she said something that really broke my heart. She said, I know the words. I understand everything you say. But when I open my mouth to speak, my mind goes completely blank. It is like a white wall.
That is such a perfect description, a white wall. You know the vocabulary, you know the grammar, you have studied for years, but the moment the spotlight is on you, everything disappears. Why do you think that happens, Ria? Why do we freeze?
I think it's because speaking is vulnerable. When you're writing, you have time to delete, you can fix your spelling, you can check a dictionary. But when you speak, you're naked in a way. You're exposing yourself to the world, and you are terrified of making a mistake.
It's the fear of judgment, isn't it? We are so afraid that the other person is going to think we're stupid. That is the core of it. We think, if I use the wrong preposition or if I pronounce this word wrong, they will think I am not intelligent.
Yes, and it is so unfair to ourselves because intelligence and language ability are two completely different things. You can be a brilliant engineer, a wonderful doctor, or a philosopher in your native language, but in English, you might feel like a child.
That is a very powerful point. I remember when I was trying to learn Spanish years ago. I'm a grown man, I have a job, I pay taxes, but in Spanish class, I felt like I was 3 years old. I could only say things like, the cat is on the table. It's frustrating. It hurts your ego.
It really does hurt the ego. And I think that is where the fear comes from. We're protecting our identity. We want people to see us as smart and capable. So instead of risking a mistake, we stay silent. We choose safety over connection.
Safety over connection. That is deep. But here's the problem with that safety, Ria. If you stay silent, you never improve. It's a trap. You don't speak because you're afraid of mistakes, but because you don't speak, you don't get better, so you stay afraid.
It is a vicious cycle. So, how do we break it? How do we tell our listeners to break that wall down? Because telling someone, just be confident, is useless advice. It's like telling someone who's drowning to just swim.
You're right. Just be confident is terrible advice. I think we have to start by looking at what actually happens in our brains when we're afraid. It's a physical reaction. It's fight or flight. Your brain thinks the conversation is a tiger that is trying to eat you.
That is funny but true. Your brain perceives a threat, so it shuts down the creative parts of your mind and focuses on survival. That's why you forget words you definitely know well. You might know the word for umbrella perfectly well, but if you're nervous, it's gone.
So the first step has to be calming that physical reaction, taking a breath, realizing that the person you're talking to is not a tiger. They're just a human being. Most of the time, they're a nice human being who just wants to understand you.
I think we often imagine the worst case scenario. We imagine that if we make a mistake, the other person will point and laugh at us. But Tom, be honest. When you hear a non-native speaker make a mistake in English, do you laugh?
Never. Honestly, never. I usually don't even notice it. Or if I do notice it, my brain just auto-corrects it. If someone says, I go to the store yesterday, I know they mean I went. I don't stop and think, oh, wow, what a terrible failure. I just think about the store.
Exactly. We are so self-centered with our fear. We think everyone is obsessing over our grammar, but the truth is, people are selfish. They're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about the message, not the medium. They just want to know what you bought at the store.
There's a concept called the spotlight effect. It's a psychological term. It means we think there's a spotlight on us, highlighting every flaw, every wrinkle, every mistake. But in reality, everyone else is walking around in their own spotlights, worrying about themselves.
That is actually very comforting to know that people care less than we think they do. But, Tom, what about those moments when you really do mess up? I have a story if you want to hear it.
I absolutely want to hear it. I love embarrassing stories because they make us feel human. Go ahead.
Okay, so this was years ago. I was traveling and I was in a bakery. I wanted to buy some bread that didn't have preservatives. But I got the word wrong. I kept asking the baker if the bread had condoms.
No way. You did not.
I did. Preservatives and condoms can be similar words in some languages, or I just got confused. The baker looked at me with such confusion. He was horrified, and I was standing there repeating it, thinking I was being so health conscious. Does this have condoms?
That is incredible. What happened when you realized?
Well, eventually he explained it, or I figured it out, and yes, I turned bright red. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me. But you know what? I survived. I walked out of that shop, I laughed about it later, and I never, ever forgot the word for preservatives again.
That is the magic of mistakes. That is the silver lining. The mistakes we are most afraid of are actually the best teachers. That emotional impact, the embarrassment, it burns the memory into your brain. You learned more in that 1 minute of embarrassment than you would have in 10 hours of studying a textbook.
That is so true. We need to reframe how we see mistakes. We see them as failures, but we should see them as growing pains. If you aren't making mistakes, you aren't stretching yourself. You are staying in your comfort zone.
I like to think of it like a video game. You know how in games, if you aren't encountering enemies, you're probably going in the wrong direction.
Yes!
It is the same with language. If you aren't feeling that fear, if you aren't making mistakes, you aren't leveling up. But let's get practical for a minute. We have listeners right now who are nodding their heads saying, yes, Tom, yes, Ria, I agree. But tomorrow, when I have to speak to my boss, I will still be terrified. What can they actually do?
One thing that really helps is preparation. Not memorizing a script, because scripts always fail when the other person says something unexpected, but preparing your first sentence.
Ooh, I like that. The opener.
Yes, the hardest part is starting. It is breaking the silence. If you have your first sentence ready, just a simple greeting or a starter phrase, it gives you momentum. It's like pushing a car. The hardest part is getting the wheels moving. Once it's rolling, it's easier to keep going.
That is great advice. I would also add, lower your standards.
Lower your standards? That sounds counterintuitive. We want to be excellent.
I know, but aiming for excellence is what freezes you. Aim for communication. Aim for ugly communication. Give yourself permission to speak broken English. Tell yourself, I am going to go into this meeting and I am going to make 5 grammar mistakes and I don't care.
That is very liberating. Permitting yourself to be imperfect. I remember when I stopped trying to sound like a native speaker and just focused on being clear, my fluency actually improved because I stopped pausing to search for the perfect word.
The pause is the enemy. When you pause to search for the perfect word, you lose the rhythm. You lose the confidence. It's better to use a simple word quickly than a fancy word slowly. If you can't remember the word for delicious, just say, very good. It's fine.
And if you get stuck, what if you're in the middle of a sentence and you hit that white wall? That is the scariest moment.
That is the nightmare scenario. You're halfway through a sentence and nothing. The brain disconnects. In that moment, I think honesty is the best policy.
What do you mean?
Just say it. Say, I'm sorry, I forgot the word. Or, my mind just went blank. Can you help me? When you admit it, you release the tension. If you try to hide it, the tension builds up and you panic. But if you just laugh and say, wow, I need more coffee. I can't remember English today. Usually, the other person will laugh with you.
That is such a good social skill. Turning the tension into a shared moment. It shows confidence, actually. Paradoxically, admitting you're nervous makes you seem more confident than trying to hide it.
Absolutely. Vulnerability is charismatic. People like people who are real. Think about the people you enjoy talking to. Are they the ones who speak perfectly, like robots? Or are they the ones who are expressive, funny, and maybe a little messy?
Definitely the messy ones. They're warmer. Tom, I want to talk about something else that contributes to fear. It is the comparison game.
Oh, the comparison game, looking at other learners.
Yes. You go to a class or you watch a video online and you see someone who has been learning for only 2 years and they sound amazing. And you think, I have been learning for 10 years and I still struggle. What is wrong with me?
That is poison. Comparison is the thief of joy. That is a famous quote, but it is true. Everyone has a different journey. Maybe that person has a musical ear. Maybe they live with a native speaker. Maybe they study 6 hours a day and you only have 20 minutes. You cannot compare your chapter 10 to someone else's chapter 20.
And also, people usually only show their best moments, especially on social media. You don't see the hours of struggle. You don't see the mistakes they edited out of the video. You are comparing your reality to their highlight reel.
Exactly. You have to focus on your own progress. Compare yourself to yourself yesterday. Not to me, not to Ria, not to that guy on YouTube. Can you say something today that you couldn't say last month? That is the only metric that matters.
I want to go back to the idea of identity for a moment. We touched on it earlier, the feeling that you are a different person in English. I have heard students say, I am funny in my language, but I'm boring in English.
I hear that all the time. Personality requires nuance. It requires cultural references, slang, timing. When you're learning, you don't have those tools yet, so you feel stripped of your personality. It's like being a painter without your colors. You only have a gray pencil.
That is a beautiful metaphor. Just a gray pencil. So how do we accept that?
We have to accept that we are building a new version of ourselves. The English-speaking you is a baby. It is growing. It might not be as funny or as witty as the native you yet, but it has other qualities. Maybe the English you is more thoughtful, more direct, more observant.
I love that. Embracing the new persona. I actually feel like I am a slightly different person in English. I'm a bit more polite, maybe a bit more formal than in my native language, and that is okay. It's like wearing different clothes.
Precisely. And as you get better, the colors will come back. You will find your jokes. You will find your sarcasm. But you have to be patient. You cannot expect to run a marathon the day you start walking.
Patience is so hard when you want it so bad.
It is. But let's talk about the physical act of speaking again, because fear lives in the body. Do you have any physical tips for our listeners?
I do. One thing is to slow down. When we are nervous, we tend to speed up. We want to get the words out as fast as possible to get it over with. But speeding up makes us stumble. It makes our accent harder to understand.
And then the other person says, what? Or pardon?
And that makes us even more nervous.
Exactly. So deliberately slow down. Take a pause. It feels like an eternity to you, but to the listener, it just sounds like you are thinking. It sounds like you are in control.
Also, breathe. It sounds so basic, but when we're anxious, we hold our breath or we take shallow breaths. That tells our brain we're in danger. Take a deep breath into your belly before you speak. It actually changes your body chemistry.
And smile. It's hard to be terrified when you're smiling. It tricks your brain a little bit. Plus, it makes the listener more receptive.
I want to address the listeners who are alone, who don't have a speaking partner. They say, I'm afraid to speak, but I also have nobody to speak to. How can they practice overcoming fear by themselves?
That is a great question. You can practice the mechanics of speaking alone. Record yourself. I know everyone hates the sound of their own voice. It's cringe-worthy.
Oh, I hate listening to myself. Even now, doing this podcast, if I listen back, I think, do I really sound like that?
We all do. But recording yourself on your phone is a safe way to face that fear. Record a 1-minute diary entry. Listen to it. You will hear mistakes. That's okay. Delete it if you want. But just the act of speaking out loud, forming the thoughts into sound, bridges the gap between the brain and the mouth.
I agree. Also, talk to yourself around the house. Narrate your life. I'm making coffee. I'm pouring the water. It sounds crazy. If your family sees you, they might think you're losing your mind. But it gets your mouth muscles moving. It makes English feel physical, not just mental.
It makes it familiar. Fear feeds on the unknown. If the only time you speak English is in a high-pressure meeting, of course you're terrified. But if you've been speaking English to your cat all morning, the meeting feels a little more natural.
Speak to the cat. I love that. The cat will never judge your grammar. The cat doesn't care about prepositions.
The cat only cares about food.
Exactly. You know, Ria, there is another aspect of fear we haven't touched on. The fear of success.
The fear of success, that is interesting. Tell me more.
Sometimes we are afraid that if we actually speak, if we actually engage, we will be expected to do more. If I speak up in the meeting, my boss might ask me a follow-up question, and I am not ready for the follow-up. So I stay quiet to avoid the escalation.
Oh, that is huge. The fear of getting in too deep. Like, I can handle the hello, but what if they start talking about politics or economics?
Right. It is the fear of losing control of the conversation.
For that, I think it helps to learn how to manage conversations. Learning phrases like, could you slow down a bit? Or, I'm not familiar with that topic. Can you explain? You have the right to manage the conversation. You are not a victim of the conversation. You are a participant.
That is empowering. You are a participant. You have agency. You can ask for clarification. You can change the subject. Native speakers do this all the time, too. If someone starts talking to me about quantum physics, I'm going to say, hey, slow down. I don't understand.
We forget that native speakers struggle with communication, too. We mumble. We use the wrong words. We forget what we were saying. We are all just trying to get our thoughts from our head into someone else's head. It is a messy process for everyone.
It is. And I think remembering that humanity is key. Tom, let me ask you, what was the moment for you with Spanish or any other language where you felt the fear start to go away? Was there a turning point?
That is a good question. I think the turning point was when I stopped trying to translate everything in my head. I used to think of the sentence in English, translate it, check the grammar, and then speak. It was exhausting.
The translation delay.
Yes, the turning point came when I just let go. I stopped checking. I just threw the words out. It was messy at first, but I realized people understood me. The moment I realized that communication was happening despite the mistakes, the fear evaporated. I realized the mistakes didn't matter as much as I thought.
So it was the evidence of success. You saw that the world didn't end.
The world didn't end, the sun still came up, and I got my coffee.
For me, it was when I made a friend who didn't speak my language. We had to speak English. There was no other option. And because we were friends, the anxiety disappeared. I wasn't performing for a teacher. I was connecting with a friend.
That is the ultimate goal, connection. If you can find a community, a group of friends, even online, where the focus is on the topic and not the language, that is where the magic happens.
That is why we always tell our listeners to find content they love. If you love cooking, watch cooking videos in English. Join a cooking forum. You will be so focused on the recipe that you'll forget to be afraid of the verbs.
Distraction is a great tool. Distract your fear with passion. If you're passionate about the subject, the words will follow.
Tom, we are coming to the end of our time, but I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. A small challenge to face their fear this week.
I love challenges. What do you have in mind? I want everyone listening to do one thing this week that scares them just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a big speech. It could be leaving a voice note for a friend instead of a text. It could be asking a stranger for the time. Just one small act of bravery.
That is perfect. One small act of bravery. And pay attention to how you feel afterward. You will feel a rush. You will feel proud. Hold on to that feeling. That is the feeling of growth.
And remember, fear is not a stop sign. It is just a sign that says, important things are happening here.
I love that. Fear is not a stop sign.
It really isn't.
You know, before we go, I want to say one last thing to the person listening who thinks they're too old or too shy or that it's too late for them.
Please do.
It is never too late to find your voice. Your voice is valuable. Your stories are valuable. The world wants to hear what you have to say. Don't let bad grammar silence a good story.
That is beautiful, Tom. Don't let bad grammar silence a good story. I think that's the perfect note to end on.
Thank you all for listening to Real English Voices. We are rooting for you. We know you can do it.
We are right here with you. Take that deep breath and speak.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.